They stopped her car for no apparent reason, lights flashing in the quiet neighborhood. Her young son in the back seat started crying in fear, clutching his blanket. When she tried to explain, an officer slammed his hand on the hood. "Who do you think you are to argue with us?" But they didn't know the teenage girl in the passenger seat had called someone they never expected. 15 minutes later, the entire checkpoint fell silent. If you believe courage has no age limit, subscribe to hear this story unfold. Melissa Turner was a 38-year-old single mother raising her 6-year-old son and 14-year-old niece after her sister passed away unexpectedly. The grief was still fresh, but her responsibilities never paused for mourning. She worked 2 demanding jobs, mornings at the local pharmacy, nights cleaning corporate offices. Her hands were rough from cleaning chemicals, her eyes tired from long hours, but her spirit remained unbroken. That evening, after finishing her shift, she was driving the children home, her exhausted son asleep in the back seat, her niece in front clutching her school books. They had just left the after-school program that allowed Melissa to work her second job. On their way through a quiet residential area, a police car suddenly flashed its lights, signaling them to pull over. Melissa complied immediately, hands trembling slightly as she guided the car to the curb. 2 officers approached, voices unnecessarily loud. "This vehicle matches a reported description from earlier tonight." Melissa responded politely, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm just a single mom driving my kids home from school. There must be some mistake." One officer, without bothering to check her statement, shouted impatiently, "ID and registration." "Now! Don't waste our time with excuses." Melissa fumbled nervously as her wallet had fallen somewhere in her bag in the back seat. Every movement she made seemed to increase the officer's suspicion. Her niece, Lana, a bright 9th grader with straight A grades, began trembling when she noticed an officer's hand hovering near his holstered gun. The casual threat in that gesture was unmistakable. A passerby took out a phone to record the escalating situation, but no one dared to intervene. Silent witnesses multiplied as neighbors peered through curtains and blinds. Melissa silently wept, trying to hide her tears from her children. Her young son woke up, immediately sensing the tension and panicking as he clutched his mother's shoulder. "Mom, I'm scared. Why are they yelling at you?" No one listened to his frightened voice. No one stood up for this family caught in undeserved scrutiny. The air grew thick with tension as the officers continued demanding documents, their voices becoming increasingly aggressive. Lana's eyes darted between her aunt and the officers, calculating what to do next. Melissa tried again, her voice cracking. "Please, officer, my ID is here somewhere. I just need a moment to find it. My children are getting scared." "We don't have all night," the taller officer snapped, tapping his flashlight against his palm. The implied threat hung in the air between them. The boy in the back seat curled into a ball, covering his ears. His small frame shook with each harsh word directed at his mother. This was a trauma forming in real time. When Melissa carefully turned to search the back seat for her documents, an officer suddenly shouted, his hand moving toward his weapon. "Watch it! Her hands are in a restricted area. Step back from the vehicle now." Another officer quickly unclipped his baton, the metallic sound cutting through the night air. Tension rose palpably as neighbors watched from a safe distance. Phones recording, but voices silent. Lana, Melissa's 14-year-old niece, was nearly in tears from fear, her hands shaking uncontrollably. But then a memory surfaced through her panic. She remembered her mother's final instruction before passing away. "If anything serious ever happens, call Uncle Max. He'll know what to do." With careful movements that wouldn't alarm the officers, Lana discreetly pulled out her phone and pressed a speed dial number she had never needed to use before. "Uncle Max, they're doing something to Aunt Melissa. We're scared. Police officers are yelling at us and won't listen." Who was this Max? Not just anyone, but General Maxwell Langford, a decorated 4-star general who once held a direct command position at the Pentagon. Lana's uncle by blood and her mother's older brother. Just 1 minute later, Lana's phone buzzed with his response. With surprising composure, she handed her phone to the officer who had been berating her aunt. "Someone wants to speak with you. I think you should answer." The officer looked dismissive and almost declined, but took the phone anyway. His expression instantly transformed as the voice on the other end spoke. "Yes, sir. General who?" "I understand. No, sir, that won't be necessary." After 30 seconds of increasingly uncomfortable silence, during which the officer's face drained of color, he turned to his confused colleague. "Lower your weapons. Withdraw immediately. We've made a serious error in judgment." The group of officers retreated to their patrol cars without explanation, departing in remarkable silence without another word directed at Melissa or her family. A bystander captured footage of the last officer pausing before leaving, bowing his head slightly to Lana. "I'm sorry for what happened here. You're braver than any adult on this street today." The entire neighborhood watched in stunned silence as the police vehicles pulled away, their lights no longer flashing. The flashing lights disappeared around the corner, leaving only questions hanging in the suddenly quiet air. Melissa stood frozen in disbelief, her arms protectively wrapped around her son, who was still trembling. Lana handed her back the phone, a small, proud smile breaking through her previous fear. "Uncle Max says we should go home now," she said quietly. "He's already called the police commissioner." The neighbors who had been silent spectators began to disperse, some looking ashamed of their inaction, others confused by the sudden reversal. The man who had been recording approached them cautiously, his camera still running. "What just happened?" he asked, bewildered. "One minute they were about to escalate the situation, the next they just left without explanation." Lana looked him directly in the eye with newfound confidence. Sometimes all it takes is for the right person to listen when no one else will. If you've ever seen someone vulnerable treated unfairly, type courage to stand with those who speak truth to power. After that eventful night, the video showing the officer's sudden change in attitude spread across social media platforms, gaining over 8 million views in just 24 hours. The dramatic shift in power was something rarely captured so clearly on camera. Internet users quickly investigated and discovered the mysterious caller's identity was Maxwell Langford, a highly respected four-star general who had previously served as a national security advisor to 2 administrations. His military record was impeccable, his reputation unimpeachable. Major newspapers across the country ran bold headlines. How a 14-year-old girl made an entire police department back down with a single phone call. In a small press conference arranged at his office, General Langford addressed the situation with characteristic directness. "I didn't do anything extraordinary or outside protocol. I simply reminded those officers that, in this country, the law doesn't discriminate between individuals based on appearance or circumstance. Everyone deserves basic respect and due process." The district police chief, facing mounting public pressure, issued a formal public apology to Melissa and her family, promising a thorough review of departmental policies regarding traffic stops and civilian interactions. A grassroots media campaign called #ListenToMothers was spontaneously launched online, focusing specifically on protecting single mothers and minority women from similar law enforcement overreach. Thousands shared their own stories of being dismissed or threatened. Lana, still adjusting to her unexpected fame, became an honored guest at her county high school ceremony, where she spoke briefly but powerfully. "Even though I was terrified that night, I acted because I knew deep down that Aunt Melissa didn't deserve to be treated that way. Nobody does. Fear shouldn't stop us from doing what's right." In a tearful interview that further humanized the situation, Melissa shared her perspective. "I don't blame individual officers. I just wish they had mothers, sisters, or daughters of their own, so they could truly understand the fear a woman experiences when faced with intimidation while trying to protect her children." A scholarship program aptly named Lana's Courage Fund was established by community leaders, supporting students who had witnessed or been affected by systemic violence and chose to speak up rather than remain silent. Lana's post-incident statement became an overnight trending phrase among young activists nationwide. "I'm not good at confrontation, but I know who needs to be called when systems fail." The viral video continued sparking meaningful nationwide conversations about accountability, power dynamics, and civilian rights. Several law enforcement training programs began incorporating it as a case study in de-escalation techniques and recognizing unconscious bias. 1 month following the incident, Melissa received an invitation to speak at a community forum on improving policing practices. With Lana by her side, she addressed a room filled with officers and community members. That frightening night wasn't just about my family, she explained thoughtfully. It represents every person who has ever felt powerless when facing unchecked authority. When my niece made that call, she wasn't just protecting us. She was reminding everyone that authority must always answer to justice. The chief of police, who had personally overseen the disciplinary actions against the officers involved, nodded solemnly from his seat in the front row. "We're implementing new protocols immediately," he announced. "Officers will now be required to state the specific reason for any traffic stop upon approach. Body cameras must remain active throughout all civilian interactions. Without exception, today Lana remains just an ordinary high school student, still doing homework diligently and helping Melissa cook dinner after school." Her moment of courage didn't transform her into someone different. It simply revealed who she already was inside. But the thoughtful young girl says something that leaves listeners speechless. "I don't want to be known as the girl who called a powerful general. I want to be remembered as someone who didn't stay silent when everyone else should have spoken up." A small bronze plaque now stands at the entrance to the neighborhood where the incident occurred, bearing the simple inscription, "One brave phone call changed how an entire community saw a single mother." Melissa has started a support group for single parents facing systemic challenges. Every month, they gather to share stories and strategies. The local police department sends representatives to listen, not to speak, just to hear and learn. The officers involved were not fired, but reassigned to community service roles, where they now work directly with the families they once intimidated. One later admitted, "I needed to relearn what it means to protect and serve all citizens equally." Perhaps the real hero isn't the one who stops violence, but the one who refuses to let it continue for even one more second. If you believe justice begins with kindness, subscribe to TT Hero Stories. TT Hero Stories, because some heroes never stop serving.